Hey, deserving listeners, let's watch Love is Blind, Season 8.
But I also am super bummed out because it definitely made me feel some type of way.
Yeah, I'll just go out and say it. I had feelings for two people here, you being one of them, Madison being the other. I validated Madison, and when I did...
Yeah, that's it. An accurate way of putting it. It's not comprehensive, and I don't think Meg understands what he's trying to say, but that is a way to say it, and I'm worried Meg is going to misinterpret it or be too influenced by Madison's narrative, because if you're going to say it in a brief way, of the brief ways it's been described by both Mason and Madison, Mason's is more accurate. The way that he's saying is, I validated her, meaning that she was looking for reassurance that I was into her, and so I did so, which is exactly what it was. Whereas Meg is going to think he's downplaying it or minimizing it, and it would be normal for her to think, how would she know, right? So, yeah, it's unfortunate.
Just did not feel right. I clearly said it to the wrong person. I felt really confused.
Mason is, I think he probably has a good heart, but he is terrible at this communication. And I would imagine a lot of people wouldn't be very good. It is a particular thing to be able to be verbal in your description of your heart and what you want and what's going on with you and how you feel. Take it from me as a therapist that sat through in my early career anyway with some clients that had a hard time with this, might not have even wanted to be in therapy in the first place. Not everyone has that ability. Not everyone was modeled that ability. Not everyone had someone to guide them with that throughout life. And he is not great. He's not terrible, but he's not great. And I think that it will not help him in this instance, because Meg has reasons, some reasonable, some that are falsely generated by Madison, to wonder if Mason is for real. And the royal road to that would be for Mason to right now, which we've seen before, tell Meg that he really, really likes her and why he likes her, and he doesn't want to lose her. And last night he thought about that and it just broke his heart and, all that stuff. He's not saying anything like that. And I don't think he will. And I don't think Meg is going to necessarily help him or fill in the blanks for him. So I think it's unfortunate that his lack of skill or knowledge or comfort will shoot him in the ass. But, it would be a sign of things to come if Meg and Mason were to be involved with each other, when they got in a conflict or something, he would still have this problem. And, that can be really hard. If you're the partner of someone like this, it can really be hard, because you can only do so much filling in of the blanks. You can only do so much talking for them or giving them the benefit of the doubt until they convince you of their love or their intention or what they're going through or why they did what they did or that they care. It's hard enough carrying your own weight in a relationship, and carrying the weight for two for many people is too much.
Did you feel confused, though, before or after you found out that she was with Alex? That's the question. How would I know if I was your number one that you would pick if now I'm just here by default?
So Meg has a point, and I don't know what this says about Meg's feelings towards Mason, which have been in question because she's so bubbly and talkative, and so maybe it was never really solid to begin with, and maybe that's why Mason was having a hard time choosing her and really connecting with her. But I don't know. So it's kind of looking like maybe that's the case. But also, I didn't react to this bit that Meg said, that she says, yeah, you found out about losing Madison in a weird way or something like that. It's not exactly what she said, but it was some kind of phrase like that. And I'm thinking, weird way? Well, Madison told him in the pods that she was breaking up with him. How is that a weird way? I think that, and we didn't see Madison telling Meg otherwise, because Madison walked in figuring that Mason would have heard from Alex, right? So, but that didn't happen. We saw that didn't happen. I'm actually wondering if Alex and Mason are still not for certain that they were both dating Madison, because the way that Mason was talking about Madison and Meg was referring to them as number one and number two. So even at this late stage, I don't think Alex and Mason, I'm forgetting if they know or not. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. Point is that we know that, or we highly suspect based on the edit, that Mason did not find out. So I think Meg still thinks that he found out that way. So that would change and if he picks up on that, it'd be really, I think it might help. I don't know how convincible she is, but if he says, no, I didn't find out about Madison not choosing me until just a little bit ago. And so last night you just going to have to trust me, I had decided that I had said things that I didn't really feel good about. I would hope Mason could say, and by the way, Madison was really putting the screws to me. And I think that Meg might hear that. I don't know. And so that would really change, because I think for Meg, she thinks that he just committed to her, right? And while he was leading Meg on. And then Alex comes back into the lounge and says, I am engaged. And then Mason's like, oh shit. Well, now I'm going to claim that I didn't really mean it, and I'm going to go with Meg. That's a different story than I think what really happened. Now, she could still conclude, well, okay, so either, even if I go with his narrative, either he deceived himself by committing to Madison, or he's such a pushover that he just gave in, or he doesn't know himself, or there's something going on here, or he decided he liked someone more than me, which means by comparison, he doesn't actually like me enough. So I don't want to be with him. Not because he's a jerk face, but just because I really was hoping that the person that would want to be with me would really, really know. So I don't want to be with, let's see what happens.
There is no one here that made me feel genuinely like myself the way that you have. I mean, I can't even explain how happy you've made me. Like, I got out of my fucking seat because of the conversations we were having multiple times, and no one's done that with me.
So this is good. If something's going to convince her that he's capable of saying this would be it. But it's not even really particularly convincing to me. The things he's referring to are the things that they share in common, like movies that are their favorites, like the movie Her, they both had up there as some of their favorite movies. So that sort of thing, typically we're not thinking of those similarities as supreme evidence of long-term soulmateship,
Meg, you were my first date in the pods, and I put a 10 down right next to your name, and no other fucking girl got a 10.
I mean, they're playing the ominous music, so we'll see what happens. But I think either he's not good at this, which I think is true, and or he isn't actually that into Meg and is just grasping for someone to be with. It wouldn't be the first time that it happened. But, we've seen it before, like when Chelsea and Kwame got together, it looked like Kwame was just resorting to his distant second after Micah broke up with him. So, and then they got married, and they're still married, Chelsea and Kwame. So, who knows? But we'll find out what happens.
You've always been my number one.
Well, and then let's look at the mess you've made. You've always been my. I think either he doesn't know himself, or he doesn't know how to describe things, or he's deceiving, because that doesn't fit the data. There's a way that you could describe this, and one of the ways that I was role-playing it, that would fit what actually happened, even from your own perspective, let alone what Meg thinks happened based on what Madison's was saying. So yeah, if I were Meg, or if I were Meg's friend, I would say, how much are you feeling it? Are you feeling it big time? Because then maybe that's enough reason to continue down the road. If you're not, then who knows, but it's not promising.
But when I walked out of the pod with her, I knew that clearly was the wrong answer. I mean, not that I chose, it was just like, I have feelings for two people.
I don't think there's anything wrong with having a connection or feelings for two people, right? Like
I really wish that he could feel the validation or the permission to say, I don't know if this is accurate, but from my perspective, and I don't want to talk crap about Madison, but it felt like she was pressuring me more than once to overcommit to her. She was basically telling me that she was going to dump me if I didn't prove to her that I was really, really into her. And I could be misremembering that, or I could have misinterpreted. I don't know. But that's the way it felt. And yeah, I felt for the two of you, and then I didn't want to lose either one of you. And Madison was giving me this ultimatum, and in the moment it felt like the right thing. But as soon as it was over, I felt like, no, that wasn't really true. It's not how I wish he could say that.
this experiment, it's bound to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But you were like number one for me this whole experience. Like, it wasn't a question for me.
And I didn't feel affirmed by you. For me to come in and be like, I have a crush on you, like, I'm clearly telling you where I'm at. And like, I could tell you were like, I kind of feel like I have to say this back, but I don't know if I fully believe it.
Yeah, I don't blame her. It's hard to know because of the way that he expresses himself. It could be that he doesn't fully believe it. That's viable. It's also possible that he very much believes it, but just has a really, really hard time based on his early childhood experiences with being spontaneous. It's a weird thing. I talked about this need before to be spontaneous, but it's a weird thing to think about, that how do we talk about the conduit between us at our core and our feelings and our visceral reactions and our expression of those feelings and those thoughts. As we age, we learn how to modify that, right? Like if we're being lectured by our 5th grade teacher and we want to just like give him the finger and walk out, we learn to suppress that for good reason. Or if we want to play with a toy when we're in kindergarten and someone else is playing with it, we learn to take turns. We have an impulse. Our true self wants to take that fucking toy. But you learn how to, it's what Freud would call the superego. And so we all have barriers or editors or filters or something, our prefrontal cortex to check in with us. But a lot of the times we are not. Like, hopefully when you're having an intimate moment, or you're sharing with someone that you trust, or you're having sex, or you are listening to music you love, or you're laughing with your friends about a joke, hopefully it's not passing through tremendous amounts of filters, right? That you could just go from feeling something to expressing it and saying it. And how do we describe that, and how do we talk about it, and how do we know when we sufficiently are allowing ourselves, and when do we know to sufficiently allow ourselves? And one way of describing him is that he just does not have that conduit, and everything is running into barriers galore and potholes and dams in the river and firewalls and editors and checkers. And by the time it squeezes barely out of his face, it is so devoid of any emotion and authenticity and spontaneity in him that it's hard to trust, especially when you're Meg and you're thinking, wait, so yesterday you just said you had her above me, and now you're saying you didn't believe. So how am I supposed to believe Meg arguably was filling in the blanks because she is so nice and bubbly and positive that she interpreted his lack of expression in a positive way. But now she has reason to not do that and to believe that maybe he has negative personality traits or intentions or behavior. And so because he has a hard time squeezing things out, then it's hard to be convinced otherwise, even if he desperately wants to convince her and actually could be convincing her if he could have that conduit be more fluid.
Like, oh, he actually liked me. Like, that's great. But I'll never know if what you're saying is true because we don't get the opportunity for one of us, for like you to pick. And I'm not gonna be able to get past that. I really do hope you understand.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. And I don't blame her. But I also don't think that Mason is this massive manipulator jerkface. I think he liked two people, and he was still trying to decide. And then Madison put the screws to him, and he didn't know how to handle it and didn't know how to maybe even articulate how to push back on it or something. And he moved forward. And maybe this is for the best because, as I was saying earlier, Meg and let's say that Mason didn't connect with Madison. If Mason and Meg were each other's number one from the beginning, then I'm guessing, given Meg's personality, they would have ended up engaged, maybe even married. But Mason clearly has an issue with being spontaneous and emotional and expressive, and even knowing how he feels, valuing himself, and being okay with his emotions, aware of that. This isn't a dig, and I don't even know if it's true. It's, at the very least, he has a hard time getting things out of his face and communicating it, from heart to mouth. And that can present major problems. If they ran into something in the future, Meg and Mason, then it can be disastrous. And it's not the typical thing we think of as disastrous, but it can go from this is sort of a microcosm of that with Meg. That I don't know if I showed all of it, but Meg's like, in the beginning, I always felt so great after talking to you, and then at a certain point, I just thought, wait, has he said that he actually likes me and that he wants to be with me? Because no, I said, he hasn't said anything overt, but I just feel really good around him. Well, that's a very dangerous style of relationship because at the sign of any wrench in the gears, like what happened here, I mean, this is a pretty major one, but these kinds of things can happen long term, then everything comes crashing down because there's nothing to fall back on or very little to fall back on in terms of evidence that the Masons of the world actually love you and care. And in order to sustain the relationship through those difficult times, I'm not saying everyone has to be like Cyrano de Bergerac in terms of the ability to communicate these things, but you have to be better than Mason. And so, because the other thing is even just from the outside watching this, I'm not sure if Mason actually likes either of these women. I'm guessing he does, but every word is so labored and so awkward for him that it's possible that they aren't real. And he feels like he has to, like he's so abused that he is so disconnected from himself and his emotions, or maybe so depressed that he is kind of just faking it until he can make it. I don't know. Having said all that, I feel like Mason is getting a raw deal here. I feel bad for him. I would put money down that his feelings were real for both women, and he, in his way, was moving down the road, and that him and Meg could have worked out, but Madison put a fly in the ointment.
I can't imagine having to be in the mindset of number two and having to deal with that.
It sucks, dude.
Am I living in Bizarro world? Mason, you were number 2 to Madison, clearly. So you just got what? I can't imagine what it'd be like to be number 2. You've been number 2 for a long time, buddy. And you just got dumped by someone because she just told you that you were the number 2. Now I feel really bad for him. I'm guessing he has a hard time liking himself. That he would throw himself under the bus so thoroughly. And maybe even sabotage his life so that he gets thrown under the bus. I mean, it's kind of looking that way. Treated like he's terrible all his life, and then sabotages himself, and then proceeds to throw himself under. I really hope that he watches the show. Said, "No, I was number 2," and that, you know, she put the screws to me. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but it felt real at the time. What? Yeah, and doesn't Meg know that Mason was number 2? Because Meg just found out that. Yeah, Meg knows. Everyone knows. Us, them, especially them, that are living it 24/7. Meg knows that Mason was number 2 to Madison because Madison chose Alex and broke up with her number 2. And Madison had Mason as number 2 for a long time. And Meg should at least... I don't know. What? Sometimes I think I'm going crazy. It'd be funny if I'm Delulu.
Sucks.
It's genuinely heartbreaking. Knowing that this is how it's...
All right, that is it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. I want to remind you to take care of yourself, know what you need, take care of that, alert others, because you deserve it, you really, really do.